Yes, Listmas is upon us. This is something I know a lot of you have been waiting for since last year's list. Everyone is putting out their lists for their favorite roller coasters, and it's time for me to join the party. I'm not one who really spends that much time trying to give each coaster that I've ridden a ranking, but I do make sure to compile a list so I'm ready when people ask me what my favorite roller coasters are. Last year, I had ridden 179 roller coasters when I made my countdown video. I have since increased my count to 226 over the past year. I got to visit parks like Kings Island, Six Flags America, Lake Compounce, and Six Flags New England, all for the first time. So I got the chance to add plenty of elite roller coasters to my list. I also got the chance to revisit parks like Cedar Point, Six Flags Great Adventure, Kennywood, and a few others. So there was a chance for a lot of my rankings to shift around a bit. With that said, I still haven't been to a lot of parks like Six Flags Magic Mountain, Dollywood, Carowinds, and a slew of others in America. I haven't ever traveled outside of North America either, so that's why you won't see any coasters from overseas on this list. Here's a list of all the parks I've been to and when I last visited them, so if you don't see a coaster like Velocicoaster on this list, please note that I have not had the chance to ride it yet. In order to keep the video flowing smoothly, I'll be doing my best to limit my commentary on each coaster so I don't bore you guys, but I do like to ramble a little bit, so this video will be a little more on the longer side. Before we get into the video, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more roller coaster content coming very soon. Also, remember that this is an opinionated video and my opinions will likely differ from yours, which is completely fine, as ranking roller coasters is all subjective. I love unique rides with airtime, hang time, speed, and a good dose of intensity, so you will see many rides on this list with those traits. With that said, let's hop right in with number 25. Number 25, Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. Top Thrill Dragster is my favorite strata coaster for a variety of reasons, one of them being the amazing view of this park and lake area that this coaster provides. The hydraulic launch that this ride features provides an intense acceleration until you hit a top speed of 120 miles per hour. You'll get a nice dose of floater airtime as you crest the ride's giant top hat, and then you'll spiral back down to earth, while receiving a little more airtime on the drop. Dragster is over in no time, but Dragster is a pure rush from start to finish. The T-bars that this ride features adds a whole other level of thrill compared to a ride like King to Ka as well. I also love the presence this ride has in the park, as you can see it from nearly anywhere on site. I'm hoping that this coaster is able to reopen for the 2022 season because Cedar Point just won't be the same without it. Number 24, Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. Behemoth is a fantastic B&M hypercoaster that embodies everything that a solid B&M hyper should be. This coaster may have some of the best airtime on a B&M in terms of strength, as I go as far to say that this coaster has some moments that are borderline ejector airtime, especially toward the end of the ride. There's also a nice helix toward the end of the coaster that delivers bone-crushing positive G-forces. This roller coaster is also one of the bigger B&M hypers, and it features the stadium-style seating, which adds extra whip to the back of the train and allows you to get a great view of your surroundings no matter where you sit on the train. This coaster also has an awesome color scheme and hugs the edge of the pond next to it. The only drawback to this roller coaster is the strong rattle that it has throughout the ride, but outside of that, this is a fantastic roller coaster. Number 23, Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Nitro is yet another B&M hyper that seems to fly under the radar at a park loaded with great roller coasters. I always seem to forget how good this ride is until the train hits the brake run. This coaster is packed with sustained floater airtime from start to finish on nearly every single hill. This coaster also has an amazing setting in the woods far away from the park. Similar to Behemoth, Nitro features some great positive G-forces on the helix before the finale. This coaster ends with some satisfying airtime as you make your way back to the station on the smaller hills at the end of the ride. The reason I take this ride over Behemoth is the setting in the woods, great layout, and overall a smoother ride experience, as Nitro has very few, if any, moments of roughness from the rides that I've gotten. I do believe Nitro's airtime is some of the weaker airtime on a B&M hyper, but the setting and layout make up for it. Number 22, Gale Force at Playland's Castaway Cove. Gale Force still remains as a one-of-a-kind roller coaster on the shores of Ocean City, New Jersey. This roller coaster is a launch El Loco from S&S and shockingly remains the only one of its kind. I only got one ride in the front row at night, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with this coaster, but what I do remember is that this ride was like nothing else that I've done. The kick flips each provide a shockingly strong dose of twisted ejector airtime. The footprint of this coaster is extremely tight, and when coupled with speeds of up to 64 miles per hour, it makes the forces feel like they are double in strength. The train and track configuration is a little odd, but I didn't find that to be much of an issue, and the ride was almost as smooth as could be, which is likely thanks to the full retract that this coaster got. This coaster was also reprogrammed to cycle the course twice, so that adds more value to each ride. Overall, Gale Force is a great roller coaster and something everyone needs to experience. Number 21, Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. The original B&M Giga is the perfect example of why trying something new can lead to something fantastic. Leviathan is a phenomenal roller coaster loaded with many signature moments. The layout of Leviathan is somewhat similar to those found on a B&M Hyper, but the main difference is that this layout focuses more on maintaining its speed more than anything else, and as someone who loves speed, this makes for an awesome ride. This was my first Giga coaster, and the drop had me shell-shocked. The B&M Giga Coaster drop lasts forever and provides some of the most sustained floater airtime that you'll find on the planet. The speed hill also provides a great moment of projector airtime as you take it with a great amount of speed, and the rest of the ride for me is all about enjoying a fast-paced journey throughout the front of Canada's Wonderland. Leviathan may be considered a weaker Giga coaster, but a weaker Giga is still better than most coasters out there. Number 20, Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Millennium Force is a roller coaster that I have a very bipolar relationship with. I think that this coaster probably would have been a bit higher if I hadn't had some sluggish, lackluster morning rides on it, as this thing takes a while to warm up. However, when Millennium Force is firing on all cylinders, it can be one of the best coasters in the entire world. Those overbanked turns that people like to call forceless are actually pretty forceful. This thing can give a great mix of floater and ejector airtime at its peak. I find that the drop on this coaster can be one of the best in the world, as you coast down it next to Lake Erie, and it's so tightly tucked in against the road, which is something you can't get anywhere else in the world. There's also just some sense of nostalgia that I seem to get when taking a spin on the world's first Giga coaster that you really don't understand unless you've ridden this coaster. I don't think this coaster stacks up to some of the newer coasters around it, but it's just such an awesome ride that I really find hard not to put in my top 25. Number 19, Stormrunner at Hershey Park. Now get ready, here we go. Who doesn't love a good Intamin launch coaster? Stormrunner embodies everything that Intamin is and can be. It's such an odd ride, but that's what I love about it. First off, that launch is amazing, as well as that top hat, but I think the elements after those is what really makes the ride for me. You go through the cover loop 135 feet off the ground, which adds uniqueness and an extra fear factor to the ride. The Heartline roll and the little airtime moment before it, being as high off the ground as it is, are really just so much fun. And the flying snake dive is just the cherry on top for me. The combination of ejector airtime, positive G-forces, hang time, and a great launch all in the span of 50 seconds is so exhilarating and satisfying to the point where you won't be complaining about the length of this roller coaster, unlike rides like King of Ka or Top Thrill Dragster. The layout of this coaster is so unconventional, which I absolutely love. That, combined with the clever terrain usage, justifies a top 20 spot for me. Number 18, Phoenix at Knoebels. This roller coaster makes me question if safety regulations are a real thing. It's hard to believe that this ride has any airtime at all, just looking at it off the ride. I mean, it's like 78 feet tall, and most of the coasters on this list are at least twice its height. But this coaster makes no sense. Outside of the first few hills, every hill has projector airtime or ejector airtime that'll make you hold on for dear life. I remember during my only visit to Knoebels so far that I rode this coaster 8 times, and every single time I was just as scared to put my hands up as I was on my first ride. This is mainly due to the minimalistic buzz bar restraints that won't come anywhere near your legs. This coaster is an engineering marvel, as this coaster's pacing just continues to pick up as the ride goes on. It shocks me that this coaster was originally built in Texas all the way back in 1948, which makes what this coaster does that much more impressive. This coaster is glass smooth, but it still maintains a classic wooden coaster feel. This ride is a kind of a laugh the whole way through kind of ride, and this ride is sure to put a smile on your face. Number 17, Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa. I generally don't love B&M loopers this much, but something about Kumba gives this coaster a big edge over all of the others. Kumba is a gold standard for a traditional looping coaster. This coaster pulls so many positive G-forces throughout the layout. it manages to cause me to gray out at different points throughout the layout. This coaster also has a very picturesque setting and basically has its own area in the park. Kuma is tucked away in the back corner of Busch Gardens Tampa, which makes it feel like it's its own experience. You can also hear the roar of this coaster from anywhere in that part of the park. In both of my visits to Busch Gardens Tampa, this coaster never had a line, so you could easily marathon it. This coaster also gives an awesome night ride because there's very little lighting on that side of the park. Kumba is just straight up an intensity machine and is everything I look for in an inverting roller coaster. Number 16, Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. From one side of Busch Gardens Tampa to the other, and from one great B&M to another, Montu is my favorite B&M invert, and it oddly has very similar traits to Kumba, except with this ride being an inverted roller coaster. This coaster has a masterful layout, including the iconic Batwing, which brings some major intensity. This coaster is essentially all positive G-forces, which is something I'm slowly becoming more favorable to. I also just love the trenches on this coaster and how they accentuate the feeling of speed that this ride has given you. This roller coaster has a great mishmash of inversions that all work together to form an impeccable ride experience. There's something about this roller coaster that you don't get on other inverts. This ride is also glass smooth, which is something many inverts lack, so that is a huge factor in this ranking. I think the old school B&M intensity, great layout, and smoothness are what puts this ride on top of my invert list. Number 15, Pandemonium at Hershey Park. A wise man once said, you can never go wrong with a B&M Hyper, and Hershey Park took that to heart when they added their second hyper coaster, and those words still hold true. This coaster is a great example of what a modern B&M Hyper is all about. This ride features many great moments of floater and flagector airtime, which is all you could ask for out of a ride like this. The first drop is like a mini giga drop. The first airtime hill provides a spectacular 5 seconds of floater airtime. The speed hill also provides a good dose of flagector airtime, but it can be tampered by the trim on the previous hill on some of the rides that I've had. The twisted hill under the lift hill provides a rare moment of sideways airtime out of B&M, and the helix throughout the Kisses Fountain is amazing. I rode this coaster during opening week in 2020 and on a cold night in December 2021. And during my most recent rides, it did run worse, but I'm going to chalk that up to the weather, so that's why I didn't drop it any further. This ride is still awesome, and I can't wait to get back on it when it's running at full speed again. Number 14, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Mako and Pandemonium are nearly even rides, but after some reconsideration, I decided to move Mako past Pandemonium on my list. I think the strength of the airtime on these rides is very even, but Mako is the longer ride and has a better overall setting, theming, and is glossy smooth. Like many of the other hypers on this list, Mako delivers great floater airtime, along with a moment of flagector airtime on the speed hill, which is probably the best speed hill I've ever done on a hyper. I think that this ride is just executed all around better than most other B&M hypers, except for one that I'll get to later. But Mako is one of the best hypers on the planet. Number 13, Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion. This is the last coaster that I would consider intensity based on this list. Intimidator 305 has to be the most intense coaster I've ever been on, which makes me have some mixed feelings on this ride. Some people think it's the best coaster in the world, and others don't really like it. I rode it once early in the day when I went to King's Dominion, and it just about broke my neck, so I wanted nothing to do with it for a while. But then I took the chance of riding it again just before the park closed, and I liked it a lot more. This ride doesn't have a whole lot of airtime, which makes me hesitate to rank this coaster any higher than it is. But the forces on this coaster are just relentless. This coaster may be the best coaster in the world for speed and being able to maintain that speed throughout the layout, which justifies a top 15 ranking for me. This coaster will definitely move around the next time I ride it, especially when I get that front row ride. However, it still remains to be seen whether it'll move up or down. Number 12, Orion at Kings Island. I think this B&M Giga is thoroughly underrated by most coaster enthusiasts. People seem to focus on what this ride could have been rather than what it actually is. And what it is a great roller coaster. Orion is stacked with many signature moments. It features the iconic B&M Giga drop, a unique wave turn that gives good floater airtime immediately after the drop, a couple of good airtime hills sprinkled in, a great speed hill, and some powerful airtime at the end of the ride, The dance is between the line of being flojector airtime or ejector airtime. The Orion's Belt, which is a figure-8 helix of sorts, is also a very intense moment that gives great positive G-forces. Orion provides a great mix of positives, airtime, speed, intensity, and basically anything you want in an airtime-centered Giga Coaster. I've heard that Fury 325 is much better than Orion, and if that's the case, I'd expect it to contend for my number 1 spot. Number 11, Maverick at Cedar Point. Maverick is kind of like the ultimate combination of elements in an Intimate Blitz, at least from when it was built. I really like this ride, but this coaster was a bit much for me in 2017, but in my more experienced form, I seem to have less appreciation for this ride. Don't get me wrong, I still love this roller coaster, but maybe I was tired and just couldn't appreciate the ride. It also didn't help that the fast lane line was a staggering 45 minutes the whole time I was at the park, so I only managed 2 rides during my trip to the park this past year. However, this coaster still has a fantastic drop, intense low to the ground turns, a couple of great airtime moments, and some solid inversions. The trim's hitting kind of hard after that launch out of the tunnel, and the lack of air cannons anymore kind of killed the second half of the ride for me. But other than that, the ride was great. I'm hoping for some better rides next time at the park so I can look to move this coaster back up the list. Number 10, Diamondback at Kings Island. My new favorite B&M Hyper just sneaks into the top 10, and what a ride it is. Diamondback might have the most floater airtime in any roller coaster in the world. There is not a single hill on this ride that does not deliver a few good seconds of floater, and each and every moment makes it feel like you're levitating. That is a feeling that I didn't know I needed to experience until I rode this coaster. This coaster is so big as well. The first hill is probably my favorite hill on a B&M Hyper. It is just unreal. I fell in love with this roller coaster the minute I took my first ride on it. The only issue I ever had with it is the rattle in sections with strong positives. But I am able to overlook that for quite possibly the best floater airtime in the world. If you love floater, get to Kings Island and ride this and you won't regret it. Number 9. Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. This was one of the most disappointing new coasters of 2021 for roller coaster enthusiasts, so my expectations were adjusted to be kind of low for this ride. But wow, were they blown out of the water by this coaster. This coaster features a nearly perfect first half. The one caveat I have with this coaster is that you need to ride it later in the day, toward the back of the train, or else this coaster won't be that good for you. In my opinion, Jersey Devil has the best drop on any coaster in the back row, and some great airtime moments such as the big Camelback Hill. Zero G stall is the best moment on the ride, as it just has an insane amount of hang time. The second half is a little lackluster since the train slows down a bit, but there's still some fun airtime, and I've heard the pacing has improved since I rode it. Overall, this is a great roller coaster and a good RMC. And Six Flags Magic Mountain is in for a treat next year. This is what they're getting. Number 8, Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. I think that this coaster may have the best layout of any coaster in the world. This leads to a great mix of floater airtime and ejector airtime, unlike any other ride in the world, and that makes me question why this ride wasn't cloned instead of the other ride of steel clones. The out and back section combined with the spaghetti bowl section makes for an extremely long ride that is pretty well paced. This ride also has a beautiful setting next to the Connecticut River. The only issue with this ride is the U-bar restraints. They aren't great, but aren't unbearable either. I wish this coaster still had T-bars. But beyond that, this is a great roller coaster. Number 7, Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. Man, Mystic Timbers is just such an awesome ride. It's just so much fun. The pacing on this ride is just fantastic, which is the key component to making it great. There are so many great airtime moments on this coaster, and it just tears right through them. It feels way faster than it actually is, and it's an unreal feeling that you need to experience. This coaster is basically a race through the woods with like 20 airtime moments, all of them ejector of course. The theming and storytelling on this coaster is some of the best I've seen from Cedar Fair as well. This is the ideal GCI winning coaster, and my favorite coaster at Kings Island. Number 6, Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. Here's our first RMC hybrid on the list. This is actually my lowest RMC hybrid, but it's still number 6, so that should tell you how I feel about this model. This coaster is freaking unbelievable. There's a bunch of standout moments, including a double down, a great drop, a few jaw-dropping inversions, and not to mention this is all tightly packed into a small footprint as well. From my experience, the ending section was actually paced pretty well, in contrast to the complaints of some enthusiasts, which really sold this ride for me. This coaster reminds me a lot of the second half of Steel Vengeance with a couple of extra elements, which makes for an exhilarating airtime packed ride. Number 5. Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. Phantom's Revenge is a great backstory that would make for a great video on its own, but the product of that story is excellent. This coaster has one of the more unique layouts, which makes for an incredibly paced journey around the hills of Kennywood. The coaster features a drop into a ravine of 228 feet, which provides some scary ejector airtime that I didn't remember from my last rides in 2018. The first half of this coaster is all about speed, but the second half is all about some of the strongest airtime in the world. It features a slew of ejector airtime until you hit the final brakes. This coaster is one of a kind. So if you haven't ridden it yet, make sure to book a ticket to Pittsburgh to get your chance. Number 4. El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. The Bucking Bull of roller coasters lives up to his name, as it has some of the best airtime on any roller coaster I've ever ridden. This roller coaster has 4 moments of insanity. The first drop, the 2 camelback hills after the first drop, and the rolling thunder hill. These are some of the greatest elements of all time. The other elements are good filler elements, but aren't anything amazing. There's some floater airtime and snappy moments on the S-bend turns. The coaster also has been getting rougher in my opinion, but I could have just caught this ride on a bad day in 2020. I also just wasn't in a great mood that day due to the condition of the park, so I might be underrating it a bit. Regardless, this roller coaster is something special, and it's something that you won't really find anywhere else, and it's still my favorite wooden roller coaster. Number 3. Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This roller coaster is all kinds of awesome. This ride feels a lot like Steel Vengeance, but it also features some very unique elements. The inverting drop is something that you don't see that often, and it provides great hang time. The final inversion is extremely low to the ground and offers great hang time from what I remember. I also love the buffet of airtime at the end of the ride. However, the 3 back-to-back camelback hills in the middle of the coaster is what puts the cherry on top for me. I think that this coaster flew under the radar in 2018, so people didn't realize this is one of the best coasters out there. RMC did such a great job with this ride, so you need to get out there and ride this thing. Number 2. Skyrush at Hershey Park. This roller coaster was an anomaly that will probably never happen again. Hershey Park wanted to build a hyper coaster in a small footprint, so they called up Intamin and they gave us an action-packed, airtime-filled hyper coaster. This is still one of the most intense roller coasters in the world as well. A lot of people like to say the layout of this ride isn't that good, but I wholeheartedly disagree. This ride features so many elements that are taken at higher speeds than they ever were to be imagined on other roller coasters. People love to say how bad the restraints are, but I've actually grown fond of them because they add a wild sense of freedom that is almost scary to some extent. This comes with the cost of a little pain, but I'm more than willing to put up with it for this world-class attraction. Number 1. Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Where do I even start with this ride? There's 30 seconds of airtime. 30 seconds! That's really all you need to know. This ride has 4 inversions that are all incredible. The first half is all massive elements that feature a lot of sustained ejector airtime with some big inversions. The second half is all smaller hills as the ride wraps around itself to the structure. There's also a couple inversions welded into the structure for good measure. This coaster is the ultimate roller coaster. It lives up to the hype. This ride is just so perfect. It features my single favorite moment on a coaster in that Outer Banked airtime hill. I tried to imagine how this ride would feel for years, but there's really no way to know until you actually ride the ride. The best way I can describe this ride is that it is a sprint that is also a marathon in the best possible way. So do yourself a favor and ride it. So that's my top 25. What did you think? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. And remember that this is just my opinion and is by no means factual. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and consider subscribing. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching and I'll see you all in the next video.